In Poetics, Aristotle discusses what a tragedy should be. He states that it should be a serious piece of work that evokes the emotions of pity and terror. The tragedy's action is best represented when performed using various methods of enhancement. In Poetics, Aristotle outlines 6 elements that he believes a proper tragedy should include. They are listed in order of importance: plot, characters, reasoning, diction, song, and spectacle. According to Aristotle, plot is the soul of tragedy. In other words, a tragedy is only as good as its plot. The ideal plot should have the following characteristics: appropriate length, a beginning, middle, and end, cohesiveness, and universals. It is also important that the plot be captivating through the use of reversal and recognition. When discussing the length of a tragedy, Aristotle uses the word magnitude. A tragedy's magnitude should neither be too long nor too short. The magnitude of a tragedy should be long enough to allow the plot to reach its natural conclusion, but short enough to last in the audience's memory. The plot must include a beginning, middle, and end. The beginning should not flow from another event, however, it should give enough description of past events so that the story makes logical sense. The middle should flow freely after beginning scenes, while also creating a smooth logical transition to the end of the tragedy. The conclusion should be an organic culmination of all the events of the tragedy. Cohesiveness is also essential for a proper tragedy. In order to have proper unity, the plot cannot be too complex. There should also only be one major plot, with all additional subplots adding to the main plot. At the conclusion of the tragedy, the audience should be able to see how each event relates back to the main dilemma. In a well-written tragedy, there should be no plot holes, and all non-essential elements should be eliminated. Plot should be so well written that if one part is removed, the whole tragedy is unraveled. The plot of Othello follows Aristotle's guidelines for a tragedy, since the events have a logical stream. The major plot involving Iago's destructive plan to ruin Othello is the main focus. At the conclusion of the play, the audience can see the connections between the main plot and the other events. In order for a tragedy to be truly authentic, it must contain universals. Essentially, universality means that the events and actions of characters happen because of probability or necessity. Aristotle states that it is the job of the poet to write tragedies about events that could happen theoretically. This aspect of poetry makes it philosophical and serious. Tragedy should also include realistic places in order to make the plot more plausible. It is also imperative that the conclusion of the tragedy follow a logical process. Random events should be excluded. The ending must be brought about by the consequences of the events and characters' actions in the tragedy. Concluding events cannot occur because of divine intervention. The events that transpire in Othello occur in Venice and Cyprus, which indicates that the play may have been inspired by true events. Essential that a tragedy be captivating. In order to hold the audience's attention, the tragedy must include reversal and recognition. Reversal is when the outcome of something is the opposite of what is expected to be. Recognition is a change from ignorance to knowledge. The best use of these concepts in tragedy is when they happen at the same time. Recognition can occur from one character to another or within one's own character. Examples in Othello include Emilia seeing through Iago's deception and Othello's personal realization that he was wrong about Desdemona's fidelity. Othello's recognition occurs with the reversal because after he learns the truth about Desdemona, his actions become the opposite of what the audience expects. Othello kills himself. The main emotions of a tragedy are pity and terror. Both pity and terror are shown in tragedies when changes in the plot occur through reversal and recognition. Aristotle also states that a tragedy must have the following literary devices: catharsis, peripeteia, hamartia, and agnoresis. Catharsis is the cleansing of emotions of the characters. It is a scene in the conclusion of the play with the deaths of Emilia, Desdemona, Roderigo, and Othello. Peripeteia is a sudden reversal of fortune. It is seen in Othello during Act 3, when Othello begins to believe Iago's statements about Desdemona's presumed infidelity. It is after this moment in the play that Othello's anger causes his own demise. Hamartia is a tragic flaw in a character. It is evident in the play as Othello's jealousy, pride, and trust in Iago causes misfortune. Anagnorisis is a character's discovery that allows them to change from a state of ignorance to a state of knowledge. It is seen many times in Othello, most obviously when Othello realizes that Desdemona was innocent. In short, the plot of Othello successfully meets Aristotle's guidelines for a proper tragedy.
The audience should feel pity when they see suffering in a positive relationship, such as that of a husband and wife like Othello and Desdemona. If a character has knowledge of doing something bad but then decides not to carry out the negative action, it is a shocking incident but not tragic. If an action is completed in ignorance with the character realizing that it is wrong after committing it, the incident is less shocking but it entails recognition, which is characteristic of tragedies. This way is still acceptable according to Aristotle. The best way an incident can occur to induce pity in the audience is when a character is about to act but recognizes something which causes them not to complete the action. The ideal situation for the plot should involve characters with close relationships. The changes in Othello and Desdemona's relationship throughout the progression of the play allow the audience to see the true losses suffered by each of the characters, as a formerly positive relationship becomes pitiful. Shakespeare's plot is still acceptable according to Aristotle's guidelines, since Othello murders Desdemona in ignorance of her innocence, only realizing his mistakes after. Because the murder took place between a husband and a wife, this involves more suffering because of their close relationship. A well-composed tragedy must revolve around the feelings of pity and terror. It is important that these emotions be purged through the events in the play. According to Aristotle, well-written plots do not have decent people experiencing misfortune because it is only shocking and does not make the audience feel pity nor terror. However, this situation occurs in Othello when the good Desdemona is killed. Aristotle also says that plots should not have an evil person rise from misfortune to good fortune. This scenario does not evoke pity nor terror, and it is not morally satisfying. Lastly, Aristotle states that a plot should not have an evil person's good fortune turn into misfortune. Again, pity nor terror are present, only moral satisfaction. This scenario is present in Othello, through Iago. Even though Iago succeeds in his plan of destroying Othello, Iago receives his just deserts at the conclusion of the tragedy. Aristotle claims that a plot will only evoke pity and terror if the plot involves an ordinary person undergoing a reversal of fortune because of an error on their part or by a character of better standing. This ordinary person should be of high status or of good wealth. This error committed by the person will change their good fortune to misfortune. The plot should be so well designed that if a person were just to hear of the details, they would experience pity and terror. The plot of Othello incorporates this aspect through the character Othello. Although Othello holds a high position, he is obviously flawed. His jealousy is undeniable, and he is gullible. He believes his enemy to be his friend, and he distrusts his faithful wife. Othello's pride and envy cause him to kill Desdemona, which culminates his downfall. The guidelines for characters according to Aristotle's Poetics are that they should be good, appropriate, lifelike, and consistent. Characters that are classified as good can be from any social class, and it is important that their choices reflect good nature. Montaigne shows the qualities of a good character as a soldier who urges Iago to tell the truth about Cassio when they have an altercation. Characters must also be appropriate images of who they intend to represent. For example, Desdemona is the daughter of a senator and carries herself in a manner that reflects her social class. Another requirement is that characters must be lifelike, which is how they would relate to audiences in real life. The racial prejudice toward Othello fits this guideline because this is how these attitudes would be portrayed in real life. Characters should also be consistent in their representations, meaning that they should act in accordance with what is probable for their character. Iago is a consistent character because he acts in accordance with his goal of ruining Othello's marriage. Reasoning is defined by Aristotle as the logic behind the character's decisions and the way it is conveyed to the audience. Characters must reason in such a way that the audience is able to have context for the plot. The reasoning should be relatable and believable to the audience based on the events that are likely to occur. It is further used to keep the progression of the plot consistent with the actions represented by the characters. Reasoning is evident in the play through Iago's soliloquies because he explains his motivations for wanting to break up Othello and Desdemona, and his commitment to this goal remains constant throughout the plot. He tells this directly to the audience, making his following actions believable in the universality of the plot. His actions fit into the universal aspect of the plot because they are consistent with his character and the progression of the beginning, middle, and conclusion of the play.
Aristotle describes diction as the use of language to create clear verbal communication. The most important use of diction in the play is how it distinguishes important, high-ranking characters from more common ensemble characters. Important characters with high status speak in verse. For example, Desdemona and Othello both speak in iambic pentameter. They and Iago also deviate from colloquial language through the use of figurative language. An example of this would be when Iago says, "O beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on." This metaphor compares jealousy to a green-eyed monster, and Iago uses it to warn Othello against his rage, while also subtly goading him on. Less significant or low-ranking characters use prose, such as Bianca, the prostitute, and the clown. Iago is an important character that is able to switch between the two styles, which alludes to his deceptive personality. The use of Shakespeare's diction throughout Othello is very unique because he also uses it to accurately share the thoughts and desires of his characters. He is able to describe a character's plan before it is played out by using obvious examples such as Iago's soliloquies. Iago often speaks openly of his plans to destroy Othello during his soliloquies, which is a one-sided conversation only the audience is privy to. This creates dramatic irony, and it gives the reader a clearer understanding of the plot. Word choice is also an important aspect of diction that Shakespeare takes advantage of. Early on in the play, Othello only uses words with positive connotations to describe Desdemona, such as gentle and my love. But once he is corrupted by Iago's words and succumbs to his jealousy, he berates her with harmful language, calling her words like whore, lewd minx, devil, and strumpet. This is used to contrast Othello's switch in personality and to highlight him as a tragic hero. Song is an important element of tragedy because it adds depth to a production by giving the actors another way to communicate to the audience. Othello employs song through the Willow Song. Desdemona sings it as a reminder of her betrayal by Othello. Emilia also sings the song at her deathbed while lying next to Desdemona. The song alludes to their deaths as being caused by the cruelty and betrayal of their husbands and functions as a way for them to convey their sorrow to the audience. Song is also employed through Iago's drinking song. The drinking song fits within the universal aspect of the plot progression and gives the actors another way to show their excitement besides talking in a normal conversation. Song is able to convey underlying messages of the plot and the characters' feelings in a manner that is less explicit for the audience, allowing them to make their own inferences. A tragedy is also described as a representation of an action and the people who are acting, which means that a true spectacle is performed rather than narrated. Spectacle allows a production to have more artistry in order to retell the story in a way that is amusing and enjoyed by the audience. Spectacle is considered an embellishment of a tragedy and includes sensory aspects such as scenery, sounds, music, lights, actors, and costumes. It adds ornamentation but is unnecessary to plot development or plot comprehension. In Othello, spectacle is seen most evidently in the visual performance.